So just a few logistical pieces first, and then I'll do a quick introduction, and then I'm going to let it go. We are accepting questions via Twitter today, and so the hashtag is Rand v. Jesus for those questions. And Rand Jesus, sorry, the hashtag is up there. Apologize, we just created that. And Elise Amix, who's, you can raise your hand, she's going to help us moderate those questions at the end. There's also, everybody's been given a survey through Students for Liberty, so if you can fill those out and hand them in on the table at the end when you're done, that would be great. And so, at the Institute for Faith, Work, and Economics, we are excited about thinking about how to make the world a better place, as are everyone here at Students for Liberty. And so, our goal as Christians is to think about and bring about greater levels of flourishing. So that's what we think about. And that's why we would do this type of panel. How do we bring about greater levels of flourishing? We believe that comes through better stewardship. Stewardship, to us, is the integration, the full integration of faith, work, and economics. Faith, how the Scripture applies to our lives and transforms our hearts. Work, what we were created to do in the world. And economics, which is navigating a world of scarcity. So when we can become better stewards, we can bring about greater levels of flourishing. This panel is an attempt to open a dialogue and conversation about how two different groups of people who both care about a freer society, greater personal fulfillment, and greater freedom overall can work together and learn from one another. And so without further ado, I want to introduce the panel. This is David Potter, a theologian and economics professor at Indiana Wesleyan University. This is Will Thomas from the Atlas Society, and this is Mark Henderson, who is the author of The Soul of Atlas. So we're going to get started. Thank you.
Woo. My name is Mark Henderson. I'm the author of this book, The Soul of Atlas. The subtitle is Ayn Rand, Christianity, A Quest for Common Ground. And I guess my entire life, the last 30 years, when I first became acquainted with Ayn Rand and Christianity, has been an adventure. It's been almost a tribute to my dysfunctions that I'm compelled to find common ground between these two disparate worldviews that most of us would agree are at their foundation opposed. And so I wanted, as a sort of an introduction to our panel and discussion, to read a couple of short passages from The Soul of Atlas to give you an idea of the context in which these two worldviews became very important to me, and I think you'll see why. The worldviews represented in our discussion today came to me through two men in my life who were very influential, who really shaped my life. My stepfather, John, was a devout follower. He's a devout follower of Ayn Rand and an atheist. My biological father, who I refer to as Dad, is a Christian. And when I was 11 years old, my parents got divorced. And so that's really when I began to learn about Ayn Rand through John when I was living in his home. Despite the bulky emotional baggage I carried to contain my resentment, despite the bulky emotional baggage I carried to contain my resentment toward John, I listened to him. My rational mind couldn't deny that he made sense. He did not admit it, but John taught me more about philosophy than any of my teachers in college and college. To this day, I maintain that kitchen table is a more powerful venue than any classroom. My sister and I used to sit at the dinner table and thread the inevitable continuation of the lecture series on whatever current events brought to mind. And it was here that Ayn Rand held forth. While most families worshiped in church or synagogue, mine worshipped in the pages of Baptist Shrine. John preached eloquently about everything from the depths of altruism and evil to the zenith of reason and rationality. At 11, I wasn't exactly written. However, it wasn't his philosophy that fostered my resentment for John. It was his very existence. As a child of divorce, I was resentful toward my stepfather, and yet what he was saying to me and the philosophy he just really shaping my life made a lot of sense. Every day, the context of me beginning to ask questions about these two worldviews came as I was struggling with cancer as a teen. And there were a lot of questions that, going through cancer the way I did, brought up in my mind, my emotions, my will to go about life. This is a passage that talks about what I was dealing with during that time. Every day stepped up the level of sickness, the intensity accumulating throughout the week, and starting over again on Monday. By Friday, I was a mess. It was challenging to go to school, but it provided some distraction. The real work began after school as I headed to the hospital for my final treatment for the week. Taking the train from the suburbs, what I later understood to be the reverse commute, was usually uneventful. As I boarded the city bus, the few whiffs of dread approached. The bus stopped just 2 blocks from the hospital, and I learned exactly how to navigate the university hospital maze. Once I reached the waiting room to check in, it wasn't usually a long wait. I was actually better off when the wait was long because I hated going into the treatment room. It was like being taken from purgatory into hell. My nostrils had been branded by the smell of flesh, being burned by the radiation and pungency of bodies, refraining from lotions and deodorants for medical reasons. And here's how I really dealt with these two worldviews. My extroverted temperament has influenced the way I approach reconciling my two father figures and their worldviews. I process things out loud, and discussion gives me clarity. I don't know all the answers, but I think I'm looking in the right place. Something like a conversation has played out in my mind over the last 30 years, and it continues to become more nuanced with every book, essay, and discussion. And that's how I've approached this book. When I asked questions as a 16-year-old, I got 16-year-old answers. As an adult, answers that were satisfying to that teenager are no longer sufficient. The ensuing restlessness has led to me to Ayn Rand's writing over and over again for fresh perspective, digging deeper with each decade. I read a lot that provides, quote-unquote, the other side, or equal time among Christian colonists. But most of the apologies address the more prevalent postmodern morality that stems from the relativism of my college days at Brown. Through graduate school, it was hard to get Ayn Rand's ideas on the same page with the philosophers and intellectuals who hold the gospel so close. I've struggled personally in the conversation of my life. It keeps returning to my relationships with these two men. While the conversation is challenging on an intellectual and emotional level, the spiritual dimension has been the trickiest. What do you mean, John objected? I'm spiritual. I'm more spiritual than any of those so-called religious fundamentalist nutcases out there. Jesus Christ. I never considered John to be quote-unquote spiritual because Ayn Rand looked at spirituality differently from others. John's spirituality didn't consist of something entirely separate from his material body, and he didn't think of his soul as something mystical or supernatural. The spirit of his moral principles ruled his own consciousness. Morality, reason, freedom, and rational self-interest, these were the virtues that guided his life. And they should guide mine too, not because he said so, but because it's the nature of men to live by these truths. By the time I was in college, I started to digest my confusion and the discord of my life. My experiences accelerated adulthood, but there was hope. Exploring my father's worldviews became my way of reconciling my father's to the child in me that was left behind. While my intellect accelerated to adulthood many years before my emotions had yet to experience puberty, my intellect gave me a platform to engage with these two powerful electrical voices. The conversation that ensued launched me on a path toward emotional and spiritual reconciliation.
society. And the idea of the structure of this panel really is to try and find common ground here. And no doubt if you ask me your questions, we can bring up the many, and they're profound disagreements actually between the objectivists and Christian worldviews. But here we're searching for common ground. And so what I will try to do in the few minutes I have is briefly introduce what Ayn Rand's worldview is, and then focus on one of the areas of chief concern that people have about it, and that's her ethics of rational self-interest, her ethics of the virtue of selfishness. So Ayn Rand described her philosophy this way. She said, "My philosophy, in essence, is the concept of man as a heroic being, with his happiness as the moral purpose of his life, with productive achievement as his noblest activity, and reason as his only absolute." And that means following your logical knowledge wherever it leads, and taking that as your absolute in your guidance of life. Now, in her ethics, Ayn Rand propounded an ethics based in rational self-interest. And this ethic, in its essence, has these elements. If you want to think of it synoptically, it has these elements. On the personal level, that is, what has to do with you as the acting agent, you as the person who will live by this ethic, it means that your life is your ultimate value, that keeping yourself alive and flourishing in life is what matters most in the end. That happiness, the experience of happiness, is precious and wonderful, but what it is the emotional experience of success in living. And it's an ethic where you do not sacrifice your happiness and your life to anything. You don't sacrifice it. On the social level, that is how you deal with the rest of humanity, everyone else, it has these core elements. There's much more to say, but there's these core elements that you deal with other people by trade. And trade is voluntary exchange to mutual benefit. This isn't an ethic of killing people and stomping on them and enslaving them and murdering them, because after all, who do you have to kill and enslave in order to live and be happy? No, you deal with people by trade. Why? Because when you deal with them by trade, your interests and their interests go together. You never sacrifice other people. You don't sacrifice yourself, and you don't sacrifice other people. And some of the key principles are to deal with other people by justice, to be honest in your dealings with other people, and to treat people benevolently, courteously, generously, and sensitively when you deal with them, to respect their needs as human beings when you deal with them. But I want to emphasize something that's foundational here, and this is that the objectivist ethic is an egoist ethic, and it's not an altruist ethic. When people hear the word altruism normally in talk today, they think it means something like doing something nice for somebody. But what it has traditionally meant in ethics is the doctrine that the ultimate intended beneficiaries of one's actions should be others. And this is a foundational issue. And so objectivism holds that, no, your life and your happiness are what matter. The ultimate beneficiary of one's actions ought to be oneself. And so when you think about ethics, it's in that context. And why is that? That's because each of us is an independent living organism. And each of our lives is a process of self-generated and self-sustaining action. If you don't eat, you die. If you don't get the right shelter, you die. If you don't find the other things you need to support your life and your existence and your health, you end up suffering and dying. And when you die, you're dead. Life versus death is the fundamental alternative one faces in existence. In this context, then, health, physical health, and happiness, emotional happiness, are what characterize a flourishing life, a life that's doing very well at living. These are the grounds of this. Are you not an individual living being? Are you not someone who needs to take certain actions to live and to be happy? That's the core. But in this context, the way to deal with other people is through the principle of trade. Trade is voluntary exchange to mutual benefit. Mutual benefit means means you don't sacrifice other people. You don't sacrifice yourself. And it's voluntary. It's not coercive. Force is inimical to trade. But when you trade, see, you're offering other people a benefit. Let's say you go into a store and you want to buy a candy bar. You offer $1 to the store owner. The store owner gives you the candy bar. This is a win-win situation. The store owner wanted the $1 more than the candy bar. You wanted the candy bar more than the $1. Both of you all want to be there exchanging those things. It's to both of your interests. What Objectivism argues is we ought to deal with everyone always in this general way, so that when we're interacting with anyone, if we are there by choice, we are there conferring benefit and receiving benefit. And this goes to friendship, it goes to love, it goes to family, it goes to everything. You should always be able to say, I want to be here, I'm benefiting, and you should always recognize that the people you're dealing with are benefiting from being with you. So that's the fundamental conception here of how to deal with other people. I want to emphasize something about the word sacrifice and the way Objectivism uses it. So Objectivism says you should not sacrifice yourself or others. When we talk of sacrifice in this context, when a lot of people speak of sacrifice, they speak of it in a confused way, because sometimes they're speaking about when you sacrifice something for something else, you're giving up something now to gain a benefit in the future. But this isn't really giving up anything in the end. In net, it's much more like an investment. If you give up something else, so you save money now, so you have savings later, are you sacrificing? No, you're not giving up value, you're gaining value by doing it. So the objectivist view of how you look at the long term, how you look at your long-term relationships is if they're worth being in, they're worth investing in. I have children, they're costly, a hassle at various times, they're a long-term investment for me in the benefits that I get from dealing with them, and I hope they're getting benefits from me. So the objectivist ethic, in its essence, is an ethic of achievement, where productive achievement is the central value in life, where the traits required for achievement are moral virtues that are incredibly important, where production comes before distribution and achievement comes before charity. In that context, material production, because it involves your whole mind, your whole soul, is a spiritual activity. So that's the objectivist ethic of rational self. Thank you.
And I teach economics at a Christian university, and I encourage Christians there that they should be reading Ayn Rand, because 30 million books don't get sold unless you capture some truth that resonates in the hearts of people. I also encourage objectivists and those who are just casual fans of Ayn Rand to read the Bible, because I think you'll find in there truths that are going to exceed your expectations and maybe even surprise you. And so today I want to talk about, in reverse order of what Will did, areas where I would completely agree with him and areas where the Bible would say this is exactly on track, starting with material activity versus spiritual activity, sacrifice and investment, selfishness and self-interest, and then ultimately ending up with John calls and Jesus Christ. So, first of all, material production is a spiritual activity. The Bible would completely agree with that. Okay? The very first chapter of the Bible, the creation mandate, God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion. So that work takes on this activity beyond just what it takes to feed you. It's a spiritual activity. Also in Colossians, Paul says, whatever you do, work heartily as to the Lord and not for men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward. He says very clearly, you are working, you are serving the Lord Christ. And if you go to the IFNI table just across the hall, you'll see a long-running video of people working and showing that work is fundamentally a spiritual activity. We would agree on that. Again, moving very rapidly because our time is short. Speaking of investment, this is a direct quote from what Will has on there. there, giving up a value now for net benefit in the future. It creates value. Interestingly enough, I think Jesus Christ would agree exactly with that statement. Okay? I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, he said, wait a minute, doesn't Jesus be the epitome of self-sacrifice? Well, in a sense that's true, but the book of Hebrews tells us the mindset behind that. And very precisely, it says, Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross. Okay? He thought he was getting something of value out of that in reconciling people to God. Okay? Despising the shame and is seating at the right hand of the throne of God. In other words, it's an investment in a greater good that he would receive. Or Jesus speaking through Matthew, whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he's a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. Now this is Jesus Christ speaking, and you can see this is an appeal to the self-interest. Serve these people, and in fact, you'll find in this Matthew 10, he repeats this 6 times in different contexts, saying, you will be rewarded for doing these things. Now, granted, the Bible has a greater range of motivation than just this, but at least this appeals to self-interest. And you might say, well, wait a minute, this is all future benefit. In the future, what about this life? Well, Paul, in many cases, but in this one specific, he's talking to children. He says, honor your father and mother. This is the first commandment with a promise that it may go well with you and you may live long in the land. He's saying it will go well with you in this life. This is for your good, is why I'm asking you or commanding you to do this. Okay, so selfishness and self-interest. Let's just look at the different types of relationships that you can have in life with God, with family, and with others. And if I were to represent Ayn Rand, I think I've done this accurately, to say that, well, she puts God to the side as not existing, and so that relationships with other people and family are a voluntary exchange for mutual benefit. Okay? And that would be objectionable that the government typically says you need to have forced altruism based on personal needs. You have to treat everybody with altruism. Well, I think the Bible would also agree with this in the disagreement with this, or agree with Ayn Rand in the disagreeing with this, that this is not the way it should be. Here's what I would represent as a biblical way. In the marketplace, externally, you have voluntary trade for mutual benefit. The Bible is consistent with that, but there are personal relationships in your family, me with my children, where it's not a trading relationship. Okay? It's actually a relationship of sacrifice to these specific people, and the Bible would say that is a fundamentally good thing. So this is an area of contrast. So, and then finally, my last slide here, I just want to bring your attention to the remarkable similarity between John Galt, the man who, by perfectly reasoned and objective standards, is the epitome of manhood, bears an uncanny resemblance to Jesus Christ. So let me just read to you. Both were born in insubstantial towns, embarked on a mission to right the world. They both attracted many followers, but revealed clearly only to a small group in a remote place. Both persuaded people individually with patience, passion, and perseverance. Both articulated wisdom that resonated with a certain type of person prepared to hear it. Both were rejected, treated as common criminals, and were complicit in their own torture. Remember the Stoddard persuaders? And both were prepared to die and yet prepared a paradise for a select few who recognized and accepted them. Now we have a paper available on the IFLI website that details this in greater detail and more than just superficial things that we can cover in this time, but I think you will find that there's uncanny resemblance. Now we're ready for questions and answers.
If you all have any questions, just tweet them in and use the hashtag Rand and Jesus. And I've received a couple, so I'll go ahead and start with the first one. Is there any fear that by tying libertarianism to Christianity that we may further alienate potential future libertarian supporters?
Well, libertarianism is a broad term, and we would like to encourage people with whatever their beliefs to appreciate the value of liberty for their lives. And so in that sense, we would like to reach out to people of all faiths, I think, on the libertarian politics. We would like to do that. Now, as an objectivist, I'm a critic of religion as such, and I think that, in fact, I'm a critic of taking broad-based libertarianism as sufficient unto itself. So I think it requires a foundation, and it requires the right foundation. But that said, the right foundation is that people are basically reasonable, that they are seeking happiness in life and appreciate it. I mean, for culture, that's what we need for a pro-liberty culture on an objectivist argument. It's not that everyone, memorizes Ayn Rand and chants the right chants or anything. It's that they, in essentials, hold to the core ideas. That's the key thing. And I think that's very much possible even while we still have religion in our lives.
I would say too that just to add to that or reinforce that the whole idea of the conversation is to engage with our minds in every aspect of our being on all of these issues. And so, like Will, I'm not ready to take wholesale any body of doctrine, but to evaluate it, to look at it, to talk about it, to process it out loud. And I think that's, groups like this are a great start.
Okay, next question. Is it possible to be both an objectivist and a Christian?
No. No, I think the basic answer here is that in objectivism, reason is an absolute. And that means the facts that you know through your senses, the facts that you know through reasoned thinking, those facts connect you with reality itself, which is the absolute environment in which we live. It's the thing that must be obeyed and understood. So the commitment to reason is, as an absolute, is essential to objectivism. If one truly is an objectivist, that's why it's called objectivism, the objectivity. And so, unfortunately, I think there aren't all the attempts to make a rational argument for a deity or for a supernatural existence fail. So in that sense, no, I don't think one can be. I mean, objectivism is an atheistic philosophy, but it is one as a consequence of its commitment to reason. But I'd be very interested in hearing what Professor Cotter has to say as well.
I would say yes and no, if I could nuance that. What Will just said at the end is really the critical distinction. The context is, do you believe rationally, based on textual evidence, based on archaeological evidence, based on other evidence, that there is a God? Then I think you would follow logically into the path of becoming a Christian follower of Jesus Christ. On the other hand, if you knew there was no God, what surprises me is that the thought process is remarkably similar that leads you to this. So it's really, the thought process is very similar. The question is there a God or is there not a God? That's a separate question for another day.
I would also say no, but probably for the same reason that David just articulated. I believe that atheism is fundamental or foundational to objectivism. And you can't have God and no God in the same belief system. So I don't think it's anything such as Christian objectivism or objectivist Christianity. That said, I think that Ayn Rand didn't really talk about origins very much. She didn't really talk about the evidence for the resurrection. Had she looked at the evidence and walked through the evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ, she may have come to some different conclusions. And I'm not willing to concede that those conclusions would have been based on reason.
Right. It's worth emphasizing that reason is the issue here. So what Ayn Rand objected to and what objectivists object to in religion is the appeal to faith, to the appeal to evidence other than the evidence of reason from evidence. And as long as we're in a conversation based on reason from evidence, then that's the right place for us to be. That's the objectivism. And then if there were there evidence in favor of some of the claims of religion, qua religion, then were that their evidence and were that provable, then so be it. I mean, objectivism is not, in that sense, atheistic. It's atheistic as a consequence. It's not atheistic as a founding principle.
That's a key point. That's very helpful. If I could just tag in, Mark told you a bit of his journey, but I started as an engineer and worked for Ford Motor Company. I was a plant controller. I left that in midlife and literally went and spent years studying Greek, Hebrew, traveling in Israel, traveling in Greece and Turkey, and examining the physical and textual data that we have, following this path of reason. And so we disagree on the data, not on the process of reason.
The next question is, do you think John Piper's Christian hedonism would contribute to this discussion? So this idea that self-sacrifice is, in the long run, in our self-interest because it would give us joy?
I'd say, John Piper influenced a lot of my thinking on this. So he wrote a book in the late 80s called Desiring God, Meditations of Christian Hedonists. And in 1979, he wrote an essay called Ayn Rand in Appreciation and Critique. So there were some things that he agreed unequivocally with Ayn Rand on, mostly having to do with her thought process. Incredible architect, internally consistent philosophy, and she checked her premises and she went boom, boom, boom down the line. And he really appreciated that about her. I think when it comes to self-sacrifice, I think his biggest contribution is saying that all throughout Scripture, there are evidences of followers of God pursuing their own rational self-interest by seeking God first in their lives, seeing God as the highest possible occupation of their soul, not themselves as the highest possible occupation of their soul, but with the end that they would lead that life of flourishing, that life of joy.
If the God that's described in the Bible actually does exist, and I don't get to vote on that or choose that, I have to, as the universe, I have to take it as a given in the universe, then that would be the rational conclusion, is that, as the psalm says, delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desire of your heart.
This next one is for Dr. Potter. Just getting a couple of tweets on clarification between the comparison between John Galt and Jesus. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, I would encourage you to read the Gospel of Matthew and then read Atlas. And I think you will find that, that Ayn Rand both consciously, I understand, imported ideas of what a heroic man would be from Jesus Christ, and I think she also unconsciously did that as well. And so very specifically, one of her favorite paintings at the Metropolitan Museum of Art was Salvador Dali's Corpus Hypercubus. If you see that, it's an incredible depiction of the crucifixion scene, okay, in a stylized way. And according to her biographer, she would look at that for hours because she thought that captured the essence of John Galt on the Stoddard Persuader. And that's when, at that point, is when I started looking at these similarities. So it doesn't surprise me that a truly heroic being would be like Jesus Christ. And it doesn't surprise me that that resonates with people in their hearts because it points them to a reality.
If I could just comment on that very briefly, a slightly different perspective. But in John Galt, Rand is trying to portray a perfect man, and in a sense, man as a god, in a irreligious but non-religious sense. So everything that a man can be that is still a man, but is like a god, Galt is. And so then Rand has notes in her journal where, how you should treat him with a certain distance because he is this figure. And she imports this kind of Christian imagery of his, crucifixion, if you will, in the book, precisely to play this up and to sort of try and reappropriate the religious imagery and some of the inspiration in the context of Athens. But I don't think she would have said she was endorsing Jesus Christ.
I don't think she would either. I think we're in agreement. The question is whether Jesus Christ exists or not.
Okay, the next question is, does this mean that fides and ratio are irreconcilable? So referencing John Paul II's second encyclical, Faith and Reason, is the point of our panel to say that you cannot reconcile faith and reason with Christians?
Okay, so far in our discussion, we were rejecting fides and endorsing ratio. So in that sense, we had rejected that. Now the objectivist point, the point that Ayn Rand overcome with the idea of reason as an absolute, is that if you accept anything other than reason as a standard of knowledge, you're sacrificing reason. You're subverting truth, and you're disconnecting yourself from the absolute of reality. So that's the issue, and this is the issue in religion. Concern that
I would just say I believe in Thomas Jefferson. Though I never met him, I think it's very probable he existed. Okay? I never met Julius Caesar, but from the data, textual and other data, it's very probable he existed. I think Jesus Christ fits in that same category as the perfect man.
I think we've been talking about rationality here. We've been talking about reason because I think that's where the two groups, the two worldviews can agree. Let's start there. Let's not appeal to the Bible as an authority because that's not recognized universally. But when I talk about my own experience, my own journey, I was confronted in my teens and 20s with evidence for the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I was looking into that. I was saying, well, how do you evaluate that? How do you know whether Jesus rose from the dead or not? And so with that evidence, I took a reasoned approach and dug and asked questions and continued to pursue. My conclusion that Jesus did rise from the dead, in my understanding, validates everything that he said. And so I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ on that basis, not on the basis of some arbitrary whim as I described it, but I'm not starting with my own experience and then taking that into conversation because that's not something we can build rapport on. And I'm not starting with faith because that, again, is not something we can build rapport on. But starting with reason seems to be a great place.